Thank you very much. I want to talk about expos and what that means for our city. And what is an expo? World's Fair is known as an expo, and expo is a World's Fair. And I can tell you that they're very, very large universal expositions, and they take place all around the world, and they've actually been happening for some time now. Now, expos happen every 5 years, and they last 6 months long. That's a major fair. There's also minor fairs that are only 3 months long. But nevertheless, it's a hosted city, and they host an event, and lots of people come to visit. And then they organize themselves around innovation, knowledge transfer, and of course, the most important thing is international global dialogue. Now, in Shanghai, China in 2010, they hosted the World's Fair. They had 72 million turnstile visitors through their fair. It remains today the largest global human experience, tourist experience in the history of humankind. These numbers are literally off the charts. Expos have been taking place now since the 1900s. And in 1889, we actually saw a legacy project, Eiffel Tower in Paris. Expos have always been a place for innovation, people coming together to organize around a central theme. In 1970, IMAX technology was introduced to the world. In 1982, we saw the introduction of the touch screen. Literally, it's about asking the human being to contemplate a central theme. And that theme could be anything, just about anything that your imagination can bring up. Now, how big and how small is that idea? It's solely up to you. Now, in Canada, we have a very distinct history of hosting successful world fairs, right? Some of you may remember, some of you may be old enough, have attended Montreal Expo 67. 50 million visitors came to Montreal at that time. And it literally was a stepping out of Canada to the global community saying, this is who we are as Canadians, Canadian innovation on the world stage, Canadian identity, completely defined by Canadians for the world. In 1986, Vancouver hosted a minor fair, 3 months long. They had 25 million visitors to the city of Vancouver. And the legacy and the transformational pieces have never left that city. And the governing body that sanctions these fairs, the Bureau of International Exposition, Canada holds a very special place in their heart because we, to this day, according to the BIE, which is the acronym, they still consider the most successful fairs in North America to have been held on Canadian soil. 67, Montreal, what did we see? We saw them organize around a theme called Man and His World. Well, we know we probably wouldn't use man and his world today as the language, but you get the picture. Language evolves, and so does technology, so does innovation, so does nation building. The conversation always changes. There actually has been an incredible legacy left in Montreal, infrastructure that they didn't have before. You can thank Expo 67 for the fantastic Montreal subway system. We talk about building a subway in Toronto. Perhaps we need an expo. We also saw young architects, Canadian architects, step onto the world stage and say, this is who we are, and this is how we're going to design our vision for the future. And this Habitat 67, which is what this project was called, was supposed to solve the housing crisis to make sure that everyone was able to be housed properly. Now, it was just a snapshot of what happened, but you get the picture. Like literally, it's the most iconic, one of the most iconic images now, still standing in Montreal. We have the opportunity to revitalize land in Montreal. That's what happened in '67. The St. Lawrence River and Seaway would not have seen the transformation from what was sort of an industrial port to now a thriving residential mixed-use community. All that happened because of the Expo. Expo 86, this is the one that really, really profoundly changed my identity. Came to Canada in the 1970s and lived in Toronto. And every year I went back and forth, almost every other year I went back and forth to Hong Kong to visit my grandparents. And I found myself struggling as a new Canadian, largely because it was difficult to accommodate linguistically, culturally. And I never felt part of Canadian culture, and I never got a sense of what Canadian identity meant for me as defined by me until I went to Vancouver. And it was the most transformational experience for myself as a young Canadian. I saw Canada define itself to the world, and I, for the very first time, in 1986 embraced Canadian identity. It was an extraordinary process of being a young newcomer, immigrant, to all of a sudden standing tall and proud and saying, yep, this is what my country can produce, and I'm ready to do it again in 2025. There was an opportunity for countries large and small to come together. Pavilions were built, countries came together and had that global conversation, and they organized around the theme. And the theme for Vancouver 86 was transportation and communication. And for those who follow the discussions today around city building, nation building, I would say they're still relevant today. The SkyTrain, you know that direct link that we always dream about from Pearson to the Union Station? Well, they got that in 86. And you know why Vancouver got that in 86? You guessed it. Because of the Expo. And they've had it ever since. A direct link from their airport right down to the waterfront in their downtown financial core. This was the building that transformed me. It's the Ontario Pavilion, completely repurposed and remodeled today, which now acts as a museum for science, sponsored by TELUS. What was incredible for me is I sat there as a 15-year-old in an audience, and I saw the 3D screens for the very first time and the flight of the Canadian geese, and I went like this. And the audience went like this because the geese were flying overhead, and I'd never experienced that, but it was also the launch of the 3D screens. So all of this was coming out as the communities were coming together. So nations were sharing information, sharing global dialogue at Expo 86. And what happened afterwards? Well, this is False Creek. False Creek is now a thriving mixed-use development community in Vancouver. Again, it would not have happened without the investments, the deliberate, intentional investments of Expo 86. They just opened up the World's Fair this month, May the 1st, 2015, in Milan, Italy. Their theme, an extraordinary theme, something we can all connect with. Feeding the planet energy for life. And the Prime Minister of Italy has stood up on numerous occasions and has declared publicly, internationally, on global stages that the Expo in Milan is the most important event for them right now in the history of their country. This is the Expo site in Milan. Imagine by the time they're finished, all of this land is ready again for development, to build new communities, to build new settlement, to build new housing, infrastructure, roads, it's all there. This is what it could look like. There was nothing there 8 years ago. This is what's going to happen. What was really interesting about the Milan Expo right now is that they've decided to put women at the central forefront of the discussion. So there's a whole exploration piece called Women Expo. And the lived experience of women are going to be answering that central theme. Energy for life, feeding the planet. How do women respond to that question? Imagine that, an international global dialogue, nation-to-nation exhibition, and women are going to answer those questions. The Italian Pavilion. These are not necessarily meant to be permanent. They're oftentimes modular pavilions today. The great thing about expos is that countries large and small get together on one site, in one country, in one host city, and it doesn't even matter who's got what GDP and who's got what population. There's an equalizing factor about expos, and that's why the knowledge transfer is so great. China, I mentioned to you, hosted Expo 2000. What's happened is that there's an alumnus community of host cities afterwards. A tighter relationship between China and Italy have transformed because they both are now hosting the Expo. 6 million visitors are expected from China to attend the World's Fair because they hosted the World's Fair in 2010. That's what they anticipate to happen. 10 million tickets were sold in Expo before the fair even opened this summer. I have two of them. China now has 3 pavilions sitting in Italy. This is the UK pavilion, organized around the theme of beehive and activity and metals. It's all about creating that experience for you. And as you're walking through that, you're going to have a conversation with people from Africa, people from other continents, and it's all about the same thing. It's about innovation. It's about exploration. Now, Dubai is going to host the fair in 2020. This is the size of Dubai. This is the size of Canada. Dubai is ready to lead. Dubai dared to compete. Dubai won the fair, and now they're committed to hosting the fair, and they have promised the world the most extraordinary fair that we have ever seen. I can't wait. This is how they celebrated when they won the fair. They lit the city in fireworks. What was really interesting for me watching the bidding process of the exposition and watching the Bureau of International Exposition award the fair to Dubai was that the people of Dubai were so active and engaged. Everybody was talking about the fair. Here's a country that's this big, ready to host the world in 2020. Competition in 2025 is going to be fierce. Don't you think that it's going to be a walk in the park? There are a number of cities right now all contemplating hosting the fair. What's really interesting is that Paris wants to host the fair again. They've already had several options. Now, if you recall, London just hosted a very successful 2012 Summer Games. It was very, very successful. Boris Johnson, the mayor of London, is now actively looking for sites to host the 2025 Expo. This is not going to be easy competition. Who's going to host the fair in 2025? I have a proposition. All right. My proposition is that the city of Toronto is ready to host the fair. We should be able to do this. We are a microcosm of the world. We are an ambassador of global communities. Everybody who lives in Toronto has some connection to other parts of the world. We all can be global ambassadors simply because we are all here. The diversity and the power of the people in Toronto is fantastic and extraordinary. However, we do have some things that we have to put forward, such as a boring business case. Well, it's actually not so boring when you look at the numbers. 143,000 jobs over an 8-year construction period for the World's Fair. That translates to 17,000 jobs every year, representing $8.4 billion of new salary and wages. That's about the fair. $13.5 billion of brand new value-added GDP. And I can go on, $5.3 billion of new revenues to the federal, provincial, and Toronto treasuries, as well as this incredible marketing opportunity. Tourism Toronto just presented the City Council not too long ago, and they said, we had a fantastic banner year. Did you know that 14 million people came to visit the City of Toronto in 2014? The anticipated audience of us hosting the World's Fair in 2025 is 50 million. They had a banner year. We had a banner year. There is an opportunity here. You may recognize this as the Toronto Portlands. The mouth of the Don River flows into it, as well as the Gardiner, as well as the DVP. It is uncharted territory, close to 1,000 acres of land sitting right there on the water's edge. We've always described ourselves as a waterfront city, so let's prove it. You saw the transformational power of expos in Vancouver, in Montreal, right? And now, think of what can happen in 10 short years if we apply ourselves, motivate our collective energies, and just did it. We would be left with a legacy of a brand new revitalized waterfront, fully serviced, ready to go. Hey, this is no walk in the park. I did mention all these icons represent a lot of work, from concept to consultation, to engineering, to site development, to environmental cleanup, to community engagement improvements, to hosting the fair in 2025, and then the post-Expo legacy. Now, we shouldn't just host any legacy. I mean, we shouldn't just aspire to any legacy, I should say. Dubai says they want to host the world's most extraordinary fair the world has ever seen. Well, what does that mean? Do we want to just have a big party? We're going to have a big party very soon. 200,000 people are going to visit our city. It's all about athletic events, Pan Am Games. I think that the fair that we should host must answer these questions. Toronto's fair must be the most innovative and technologically advanced expo the world has ever seen. It must be the world's most socially responsible and inclusive fair. It must be the most accessible fair. We're different. We can't do what Dubai does. And of course, it has to be the world's greenest, most sustainable fair. That's the kind of world fair that I would like us to hold. You know about this summer's activities? It's going to be a lot of excitement. Our numbers are much bigger in 2025. Taking action is more than just making a phone call and sending an email. Taking action, in this case, in terms of how we define the fair for ourselves, is that if we are to host the fair, it has a beginning and it has an end. And by the time it ends, we should all be standing taller and prouder as Canadians, just like I did at age 15 in Vancouver, That's what the fair did for me. That's what I'd like the fair to do for the new generation of Canadians. Thank you very much.